Welcome to My Story Time by MyBookSummary.com. Get ready for quick wisdom of countless stories and explore. Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is one of the most important and monumental engineering achievements in the world. Located in Central America, the canal links the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean, dramatically shortening the maritime journey between the east and west coasts of the Americas. Before its construction, ships had to make the long and perilous journey around the southern tip of South America, known as Cape Horn, to pass from one ocean to the other. The canal, which opened in 1914, has been critical in shaping global trade and international relations. The story of the Panama Canal, however, is not just about its engineering feat. It is a tale of ambition, politics, and resilience. The canal's construction spanned several decades, involved multiple countries, and was fraught with challenges, from disease outbreaks to political conflicts. The canal's history is also deeply intertwined with the geopolitical struggles of the time, involving the United States, France, Colombia, and Panama, among others. In this detailed account of the Panama Canal, we will explore its history, the various phases of its construction, its economic and strategic significance, and the long-term impacts on global trade and politics. Through this story, we will gain insight into one of the most ambitious human undertakings ever completed: origins and early attempts. The idea of constructing a canal across the narrow Isthmus of Panama to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans dates back to the early Spanish explorers in the 16th century. However, it wasn't until the 19th century that the idea gained traction, especially with the rapid growth of international trade and the need for faster maritime routes. The first serious attempt to build the canal came in the 1880s under the direction of French engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps, who had successfully overseen the construction of the Suez Canal. Inspired by this success, de Lesseps believed that a similar canal could be constructed in Panama. He founded the French Panama Canal Company and began work in 1881, but the project quickly faced insurmountable challenges. The site chosen for the canal, the Panama Isthmus, proved to be much more difficult to navigate than anticipated. The terrain was rugged, and workers faced the constant threat of tropical diseases such as malaria and yellow fever, which decimated the workforce. Furthermore, de Lesseps underestimated the engineering challenges of digging through the mountains and creating a functional canal. After over a decade of futile effort, with resources dwindling and the workforce severely reduced by illness, the French attempt at building the canal was abandoned in 1889. The project was considered one of the greatest failures in engineering history. The role of the United States. After the failure of the French, the dream of the canal was not abandoned. The concept remained vital to many, particularly those in the United States, who realized that a transoceanic waterway would significantly enhance their military and commercial power. At the time, the United States was expanding its influence across the globe, and the need for a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans had become pressing, particularly in terms of military strategy. In the late 19th century, the U.S. government took serious interest in constructing the canal. At first, the U.S. focused on negotiating a deal with Colombia, which then controlled Panama, to allow for the construction of the canal. The Hay-Herran Treaty was signed in 1903, which granted the U.S. the right to build and control the canal. However, when the Colombian Senate rejected the treaty, the United States began to explore other options. The U.S. saw an opportunity when Panama, then a province of Colombia, experienced unrest and dissatisfaction with the Colombian government. Encouraged by the U.S. government, Panama declared its independence in November 1903. The United States swiftly recognized Panama's independence and, in turn, signed the Hay-Buenaventura Treaty with a new Panamanian government, which granted the U.S. control over the canal zone. This agreement, though highly controversial, marked the beginning of the U.S. involvement in the construction of the Panama Canal. Construction and engineering challenges. The construction of the canal itself would prove to be a monumental challenge, both in terms of engineering and logistics. The canal's route was designed to pass through some of the most difficult terrain in the world, and overcoming these challenges would require the application of cutting-edge engineering techniques and a vast workforce. One of the greatest obstacles was the need to cut through the towering mountain range, known as the Continental Divide. To do so, engineers decided to use a system of locks, which would raise and lower ships as they passed through the canal. These locks were an incredible feat of engineering, but constructing them posed immense challenges. Another significant challenge was the tropical diseases that had plagued earlier efforts. Yellow fever and malaria were rampant in the region, and efforts to combat these diseases became a critical part of the project. Under the leadership of Dr. William Gorgas, the U.S. began a large-scale sanitation campaign to eliminate the mosquitoes that spread these diseases. This included clearing the jungle, draining stagnant water, and fumigating areas with insecticides. By the time the canal was completed, these measures had succeeded in dramatically reducing the spread of disease, making the construction effort much safer. The scale of the project was staggering. Tens of thousands of workers were employed, many of whom were brought in from the Caribbean, particularly from the Caribbean islands of Jamaica and Barbados. The workforce faced brutal working conditions, with long hours and little respite from the tropical heat. Yet, the project moved forward steadily, driven by both technological innovations and the determination of the workers. The completion of the canal. After a decade of grueling work, the Panama Canal was finally completed and opened on August 15, 1914. The completion of the canal was a triumph of human ingenuity and perseverance. It had taken more than 10 years to complete, cost over $375 million, equivalent to billions in today's money, and required the labor of tens of thousands of workers. Yet, the canal was not only an engineering achievement, but also a symbol of American power and global influence. The canal opened just as World War I was beginning, and its strategic importance was immediately evident. Ships could now travel between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans in a fraction of the time it had previously taken, and the economic benefits were enormous. Trade between the United States and Asia became far more efficient, and the canal opened up new opportunities for global commerce. The strategic importance of the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal's strategic significance cannot be overstated. Even before its completion, the canal was seen as a pivotal asset in the geopolitical landscape, offering unparalleled advantages to countries, especially the United States. The ability to shorten the maritime journey between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans was a game-changer for military operations, global trade, and the world economy as a whole. For the United States, the canal became a key tool in establishing its dominance in the Western Hemisphere. With the completion of the canal, the U.S. Navy could rapidly move ships between the two oceans, increasing its military reach and flexibility. In a time of growing international tensions, the canal became an invaluable asset for projecting power, ensuring that the U.S. could defend its interests on both coasts without the need for a long, arduous journey around South America. Economically, the canal also became a central hub for global trade. Ships from around the world could now pass through the canal to access the markets on either side of the Americas, drastically reducing shipping times and costs. As a result, Panama became a key link in the global supply chain, boosting trade between North America, Europe, and Asia. In addition to these military and economic benefits, the canal also helped the United States strengthen its influence in Latin America. The U.S. saw the canal as both a symbol of its power and a physical manifestation of its expanding sphere of influence in the region. The control of the canal allowed the United States to exercise considerable leverage over the countries in its vicinity, especially in times of political instability or war. The canal's importance was highlighted during World War II, when it allowed for the quick movement of military supplies and reinforcements between the Atlantic and Pacific fronts. The U.S. military's ability to shuttle resources across the world's oceans without losing time was crucial in maintaining its strategic position. The canal's role in the war further cemented its status as a cornerstone of U.S. military and economic power. The long-term impact on global trade. In the years following its completion, the Panama Canal revolutionized global trade, allowing goods to move more efficiently between the East and West. Before the canal's construction, goods had to travel around the southern tip of South America or across long and treacherous sea routes. The canal drastically reduced the distance, cutting travel time, by as much as 50%. As a result, it became an essential artery for global commerce. One of the most significant impacts of the canal was the facilitation of trade between the United States and countries in Asia. Prior to the canal, goods had to make the long journey around Cape Horn or through the Suez Canal, which was significantly more time-consuming and costly. With the canal's opening, ships could travel from the U.S. East Coast to the west coast of the Pacific, bringing goods from Asia and other parts of the world more quickly and at a lower cost. This had profound effects on the economies of both the United States and Panama, as well as the countries involved in global trade. It contributed to the rise of major international ports and shipping companies, many of which built their businesses around the canal route. The efficient movement of goods through the canal allowed industries to thrive, especially those involved in the transportation of bulk commodities, oil, and manufactured goods. Additionally, the canal became a vital route for the transportation of raw materials, such as petroleum, grain, and minerals, that were essential to the global economy. By providing a faster and more reliable route, the canal helped stimulate growth in various industries, particularly in the United States, where demand for raw materials from Latin America and other parts of the world increased. The canal also played an important role in the development of modern trade networks, connecting countries and regions that were once distant from each other. It helped create a global economy in which goods moved more easily across borders, fostering economic interdependence between nations. The controversy of U.S. control. While the Panama Canal was an incredible achievement, its construction and subsequent control by the United States were not without controversy. The U.S. had gained control of the canal zone through the Hay-Buenaventura Treaty, signed in 1903, after Panama declared independence from Colombia. The treaty granted the United States sovereignty over the canal zone, but the terms were widely regarded as unfair to Panama. Many Panamanians believed that the treaty was imposed upon them by force, and it became a symbol of U.S. imperialism in Latin America. For decades, the Panamanian people felt that they had been exploited by the United States, which controlled the canal and profited from it while providing little benefit to Panama itself. This resentment simmered for many years, and it ultimately contributed to a growing sense of nationalism and desire for sovereignty. In the 1960s and 1970s, a wave of political change swept across Latin America, and Panama began to demand that the United States relinquish control over the canal. This was fueled by growing anti-imperialist sentiment and the desire for greater control over the country's natural resources. Panamanians wanted to reclaim the canal zone and benefit more directly from the revenue generated by the canal. Negotiations between the United States and Panama culminated in the Torrijos-Carter Treaties of 1977, which established a timeline for the gradual transfer of the canal to Panama. Under the terms of the treaties, the U.S. agreed to hand over full control of the canal by December 31, 1999, while Panama agreed to maintain the canal as a neutral zone, ensuring that it would remain open to ships of all nations. This was a significant turning point in the history of the canal, as it marked the end of U.S. control and the beginning of Panama's management of this critical waterway.